While originally released on phones and PC back in 2012, Gunman Clive really shot to fame in 2013 when it arrived on the 3DS and became one of the standout indie titles thanks to its fun gameplay and incredibly affordable price. The sequel arrived 2 years later and retained that very same admiration. Eventually they were bundled together and put out in HD in a nice little collection. And that's what we have here today. I'm Jordan from SwitchWatch and we're going to take a look at Gunman Clive HD Collection. Before we get into it, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for honest, reliable Nintendo Switch content. The story for this collection of 2 games is thankfully very simple to explain considering the second game literally picks up from the ending of the first. The plot of the first game has Clive battling his way through nefarious bandits in rescue of the kidnapped Miss Johnson. Now, major spoilers here. He succeeds. The second game then begins with Clive wanting to finish off the bandits once and for all and is in chase of their leader. There's no spoken dialogue and cutscenes are barely even present, so if you're desperately searching for a story-based platformer, you're looking in the wrong direction. I suggest heading over to something like Iconoclast instead. At their core, the Gunman Clive games are uncomplicated run-and-gun platformers. If I had to make a straight comparison, it would be to the early Mega Man games, yet even more simple than that. Using only 2 buttons, shoot and jump, you need to outgun a plethora of bad guys as well as participating in some devious tests of your platforming skills. With only 2 buttons, you don't get much simpler than this. Both games play exactly the same, although the second certainly feels a little more refined in a few aspects. Your rate of fire is more consistent, for example. When it comes to gameplay, it is on the slower end. There's no dashing or power sliding, just a gentle jog through levels, taking one platform and enemy at a time, usually. It can feel a little meandering in comparison to some platformers out there, especially with the lack of a sprint button, but I for one enjoyed its more leisurely pace. There are moments when quick reactions are needed, especially as time goes on, so please don't mislabel these 2 games as being boring. There are 3 initial characters to choose from right at the beginning and a 4th character available once completing the game. At least I believe that's the case. Maybe I did something extra special, but I doubt it. I won't spoil the unlockable character because it's just so hilarious and well worth it. The 3 starting characters are Clive, whose mechanics I just stated, Miss Johnson, who plays very similarly but is restricted in normal movement, I think, but can have a mini glide after jumping, just like Princess Peach in the Mario games. The 3rd character is a Native American fella who plays very differently considering he doesn't have a gun. Instead he has a spear he needs to poke enemies with, so you'll be getting up close and personal with his playthrough. The 4th character is even more different and completely changes up how you play the game, and I think it's a nice challenge for those who enjoyed the initial game. There are only a handful of power-ups in these games. Your pistol can be altered by picking up random item drops from enemies, and if you see one, you're highly advised to pick them up because they can really make a world of difference when it comes to making your life easier. The most common is the spread shot, which shoots 3 bullets at a time, shotgun style. You'll have a more explosive round which packs a fair punch, as well as a homing style weapon and laser fire. That's pretty much it. You have to be careful though, because as soon as you get hit, any power up you have will disappear and leave you with the base revolver. It's pretty harsh, but I feel it balances the game's difficulty out well. Each game has 3 difficulties and I personally played on the default normal difficulty and I felt it had a nice balanced challenge. Not too difficult, but not super easy either. The first few levels may give a false impression of it being overly easy, but once you've gotten into your stride, the platforming and enemy placements can give you some good test of your skills. And if you're like me, you'll end up dying a fair bit. Playing on normal can be fairly brutal too, since if you die you have to start the level from scratch. Sure, they are short, but each one is packed with mini challenges. The biggest challenge for some may be in the boss battles, which occur at fairly regular intervals. Big, beastly, and not letting you rest for a second, you'll definitely need a handful of tries before overcoming them, and after learning their attack patterns and how to deal with each. While both games in this collection play almost identically, it's worth noting that there is a significant feeling of change between the 2. I obviously played the original game to completion first before moving on to the sequel, and I really wasn't prepared for the jump in caliber. The first game is a lot of fun for sure, and includes some great level design. The sequel, however, makes the original game feel more like a prototype or a demo. That's not to besmirch the first, but to Praise Gunman Clive 2 because despite the mechanics being exactly the same, the ambition in level design, confidence and personality is taken to another level. It feels like the designer really went to town with this one after getting comfortable with the first entry. Currently it's been over the same length of time between the first and second game. I'm hoping the third entry isn't too far away because I'm excited about what this developer can do next. One thing I really enjoyed is that it doesn't dwell on one line of thought for too long. Each level usually gives you a new challenge or novelty, and in a couple of minutes it's over. The game moves on. It never drags anything on for too long, which is something you'll always find in the most top-notch of platformers like in a Mario or Donkey Kong game. Each level concentrates on one new thing or challenge. Obviously it's not up to those heights, but it shows that the creator knows how to pace a game very well, even if it's only an hour or two long. So often you'll find even decent platformers don't know when to quit with certain aspects of their game. I suspect Gunman Clive could easily have been twice or three times the length if the developer wanted to, but chose to go for quality over quantity, and that is a commendable choice. I think the major criticism of the initial release was that it was just too short, but I think it's perfect and all the better for it, especially considering the price, which I'll get to in a couple of minutes. The first game will take you about an hour or less, and the sequel will be double that. It totally depends on how good your skills are though, because as mentioned, there can be some tough bits in these games, and I wouldn't be surprised if you had to replay some parts over a few times. As for my personal criticisms, I only have one I suppose. As stated, the game can be a bit of a challenge, and the main culprit of that during the standard levels is the often trial and error nature to it. You'll often find yourself getting undone by enemies or platform switches that you just can't see coming until you've been foiled by them and have to make a mental note for the next time you get to this spot. That may not be to everyone's taste, but I feel the short nature of the game and the compact levels make this far less of a nuisance than it would be in other titles. The audio is very good. It's the only thing not done by the game's creator, and I think that's a good choice as the person in charge of the music does a fantastic job in capturing the essence of a western. I will criticize the sound effects though for being a little weak, but that's a minor point in the grand scheme of things. For the visuals, they've gone for a faux hand-drawn look over what is just a very basic 3D game. The first game is rather uniform in its look. It's mostly very monotone and unchanged throughout, aside from a few striking enemies and bosses that really stick out. The second game is far more adventurous with its color palette, as each location shares a different color scheme as you'd expect from traveling the globe. I'm not exactly sure which game I prefer when it comes to the color choices. The original game is very strong and memorable, while the second one does give it a bit of variety, but can also be slightly distracting at times. Either way, I think both of them look very lovely for what is a simple, cheap game. For £3.59 or $3.99, I can't complain at all. When actually handing over cash for an eShop game, you're rarely going to find such lovely quality for such an affordable price, unless there's a massive sale on something. I'd pay more than this for a sea salt caramel latte, honestly, and I'll get far more goodness from 3 hours with Gunman Clive or more. I don't normally like replaying games, especially as finite as platformers usually are, but because you can blast through this old school style, I actually do feel compelled to go back to this one, especially the first, which can be completed in an hour. The 4 different characters add to this too. I would say it's definitely worth that hard-earned cash of yours. Don't wait for a sale. Before we get into my final verdict, if you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button to stay up to date with all the latest Nintendo Switch content from us. Reviews, gameplays, and features, it's well worth it. So onto my verdict. As just stated in the value section, you will find it difficult to get such quality for the price tag on this one. The 2 Gunman Clive games may not exactly be the pinnacle of the platforming genre, but they are lovingly crafted, fun to play, and are worth every penny. It's simple goodness that doesn't outstay its welcome, and to think that these 2 games were made by one Swedish dude gives it even more cred. I would say that unless you're allergic to platformers, you owe yourself a quick purchase for this nice little collection. It may be a bit slow paced for some, but for what it offers in terms of ideas and execution, you can't really go wrong with it. You really can't go wrong with spending $4 on this one. It's an 8.5 out of 10. If you're looking for a platformer with a bit more meat to it, then check out my recent review of New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe. I'll see you guys over there, take care.